Of course, this is the intellectual traditions of all the indigenous peoples that we have here, and we have so much to offer the world and all our wisdom, because you probably know that many of the conquistadors tried to destroy our knowledge bases and libraries because they didn't want anybody to know how intellectual that the traditions that we have. So we acknowledge the ancestral lands, acknowledge the invitation to speak, and attempt to reclaim our intellectual voice, political and geographical space, and that we know that our research is a condolence ceremony because we have to go through the various processes of understanding. One of the issues is colonialism on the classroom. Heather, you want to go ahead and talk to this PowerPoint, the slide?
So one of the things we're going to be talking about today is colonialism on our college campus, Cameron University. And to start things off, this is just a list of some of the things that we see every day. And so there's a lack of a land acknowledgement from our university on both our website and on our class syllabi. There's a lack of a vice president of minority affairs or minority student success. There's no one person to bridge the gap between not only Indigenous but other minority students and the administration. We see a lack of Indigenous acknowledgement in the current regalia policy for our commencement. So that was revised about 2 years ago, and I was part of the committee that did revisions, and I submitted different regalia policies around Indigenous attire, and they were completely left out of the rewritten regalia policy. There's no representation of our tribal nations on campus. There's no Indigenous history courses or Indigenous language courses. There is not a safe space for multicultural students on our campus. And that's cut off at the bottom, but there's a continuous disregard of racism toward minority students, even reported to the Title IX office.
Heather, if I could mention that because of the silence and the lack of attention, what I had to do was go do a formal grievance and file a grievance to the Office of Civil Rights and Commission. So that is ongoing. So I just wanted the audience to know that.
Yes. So there's been several incidents on our campus with racism in the classroom, and it's typically student to student. There's no repercussions or consequences that come from professors, and then when it's reported to the Title IX office, it's basically swept under the rug, disregarded completely. And we're going to talk about some of those narratives of different incidences on campus later on in our presentation. So with the Vice President of Minority Affairs or Minority Student Success, there's basically no person that multicultural or minority students can go to express concerns about their treatment on campus, or even with education suggestions about, say, history curriculum. Some of us have had curriculum in our history classes that are false. I had a professor in my history class since 1865. We got to 1492 and he told us that Columbus came and discovered America, and there was peaceful relations between the Native Americans and the settlers that came with Christopher Columbus. We know that that's false. And so when I brought up the issue, my professor refused to hear me out about changing the curriculum and adding in more of the Indigenous perspective. And at that point, there's nobody else I can go to except for the department chair which was very close friends with the professor that I had in class. And so having a vice president of minority affairs, minority student success would allow students to bring those concerns to somebody in upper administration. There's no Indigenous acknowledgement in the current regalia policy. There are requirements about what can be worn on our cap. So I know that some students wear an eagle feather and some wear it in place of or next to their tassel. And so it would hang off the edge of the mortarboard, which in the regalia policy, it's written that nothing except the tassel can hang from the mortarboard, including an eagle feather. And so that was something that I felt very strongly about at the time that I helped revise the regalia policy. And I submitted different policies from other universities in our area, and even a high school that had recently had a news story about Native American regalia, and it was ignored and disregarded. Tribal flags on campus. So that's something that we've been talking to administration about. That is something that's very simple to accomplish to make Indigenous students feel seen and acknowledged. And there has been refusal from every single person that we've talked to, from the dean of students to the vice president of student success. So that's just something that we feel is a very simple task that is ignored. There's no Indigenous history courses or Indigenous language courses. That goes back to some of the curriculum is also false and doesn't teach the correct Indigenous history. Indigenous language courses. So at one point in time, you could take the Comanche language as a course here at Cameron. There are no professors that teach that course anymore. But when you go to enroll and look at our class schedules, you can select Comanche to show you the classes that fall under it. And there's never been any classes under it for as long as I've been enrolled, since 2017. So that's something that could either be corrected, or there are plenty of people that we can bring on that can teach the Comanche language, even as a workshop. A lack of a multicultural student center. So there's no set place for multicultural and minority students to gather together. There is an area for sorority and fraternities to gather together. And that's the only designated area on campus for students, is for our sororities and fraternities. So activism on our campus. So this is just a timeline of events, of things that happened. So there was a photograph posted on Twitter of one of the players on the women's golf team dressed up in a homemade, skimpy Native American costume. And so that was posted on Halloween. And then on November 6th, we had our first physical demonstration of resilience. So we gathered on our campus, students, community members, members of AIM, and tribal leaders gathered to protest and ask that administration see us and take action. That led to December 5th. We had a meeting with our president of our university, President MacArthur, and Indigenous students via Zoom online. With that, it was interesting, to say the least. Our president requested that it was only him and students, that no outside community members be present. So I'm going to elaborate on that here in a minute. And then on January 15th, we had our second physical demonstration. And then on March 24th, we had a student speak out online via Zoom. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about each of those events. So our demonstrations of survivance and resilience. The Indigenous students of our university, we actively avoided using the word protest in our campaigning and advertising for our demonstration to ensure that we had a peaceful demonstration, and to let our administration know that we were not attacking them, but we were asking them to take action and stand with us. Our demonstrations received local media coverage via TV news and printed newspaper, and a large online following as well. I believe our post reached approximately 500 people. The demonstrations were attended by students, community members, AIM representatives, and tribal leaders. The CU president did not respond to our first demonstration for a month. And so in our meeting with the CU president, like I said, he requested that only students be present in the meeting with him. He took up most of the allotted time on the Zoom call. He talked mostly about how he was surveying the campus climate and developing a new committee called Diversity and Inclusion. When asked specifically to respond to the photo that was posted on Halloween, he did not address the topic and the demonstrations until like the last 10 minutes of our Zoom meeting. He said that any student had First Amendment rights to express themselves, and that response was prompted when we asked him where the Title IX investigation was leading. He told us that it would lead to no outcome or no consequence because it was a First Amendment issue. Our Student Speak Out was Native Indigenous students came together to host a dialogue about minority experiences on campus. The president chose not to attend even when invited by students. The host Native student organization on campus were asked by the AAUP not to use the Halloween photo on our posted flyer. Speakers were Indigenous students, mostly represented by the Native American Student Association and the Gamma Delta Pi sorority.
Hi, everyone. So I'm just going to be talking about the Halloween incident itself. The Cameron University Native American Student Association, or CUNASA, was made aware of an instance of cultural appropriation on November 1st, 2020, even though the picture was posted on the previous day on Halloween. That post was done by the Cameron's University's women's golf team on the afternoon of Halloween. The event in question was a trunk or treat that the golf team participated in. As seen in the photo, one of the players wore a fake Indian costume and another student wore a cowboy costume, portraying the narrative of cowboys versus Indians. The university failed on several occasions to condemn this instance of cultural appropriation on the grounds of free speech, like Heather did say. This is extremely harmful because of the over-sexualization and fetishization of Native culture and people, which contributes to higher cases of missing and murdered Indigenous girls, women, and Two-Spirit people. Higher rates of violence against Natives are connected to the portrayal of Indigenous people as savage as well. And while it might not be seen as racist, it can be argued that wearing such costumes is equivalent to blackface or yellowface. Okay, solidarity efforts on campus. Efforts on campus to promote solidarity between minority groups are largely limited to minority organizations that are on campus and individual minority participation in activism and awareness events. These events include, but are not limited to the following: protests, panel discussions, speakouts, marches on campus, searches, discussion meetings, trainings, cultural events, workshops, etc. These are the ethnic minority groups that are on campus. These include CUNASA, which is us, a student-led group whose purpose is to unite and represent the Native American student body by establishing a sense of identity, preserving the customs and heritage of our members, as well as advocating the advancement of our students socially, culturally, and academically. Gamma Delta Pi is the next one, and it is the Native American sorority that is dedicated to enriching the lives of all American Indian women. Active Association is next, and that is a group that promotes intellectual growth through community involvement, cultural enrichment, and academic excellence, social and political awareness. Diversity Diplomats, that is a student diversity group that seeks to promote awareness and education regarding modern issues surrounding minorities of all backgrounds. And the last one, that is not an ethnic minority group. It is a minority group for students on campus called Pride. It's an LGBTQ plus group on campus that's dedicated to promoting the awareness of LGBTQ plus issues and a safe space for people of the queer community. Unfortunately, that one isn't active though. So as of now, there are only 4 major minority groups on campus. CU failure to respond to racism. CU NASA Indigenous Peoples Day Committee requested for the CU president to condemn the death of George Floyd, but days later received After receiving this request, the CU president posted a brief lean response and a message from the president about the George Floyd murder. He failed to go ahead and condemn racism that occurred as a result of the murder and failed to secure the confidence and peace of their Black students, even during the protests that are still happening across the country as a result of the continued murder of BIPOC people by law and police enforcement. Cameron University fails to take a stance on human rights issues. As a result of COVID-19, many Asian American students and immigrants from the East have been receiving large amounts of discrimination as well as violence and harassment. Students from all levels of university are openly racist regarding the origin of the virus, but some of the most common offenders were scholarship students, leadership students, and student athletes. Some of the most known offenders were people in my own scholarship class, the Plus Leadership Scholarship. Too often, universities and other academic institutions push diversity as a recruitment and retention tool without taking steps to secure the safety of said diverse students. Diverse students are often viewed as a means to an end, whether to gain awards or funding for universities or as marketing tools. Creation of such systems to battle oppressive and bigoted structures within academia without the input of people affected by those structures only demonstrates the value that universities place on those diverse students. Speaking about activism and education without taking action does not help to moderate difficult conversations between opposing groups. Rather, inaction is a conflict, and centrism in political issues strengthens oppressive groups and invalidates the disenfranchised who are affected by the issue said in question. While it cannot be said that the experience is unanimous among all Indigenous students, many students experience harassment from their peers and some professors as well. Blood quantum is often brought up in these instances, and it is done in an effort to evaluate whether students are Native enough. The invalidation of mixed students with Native identities furthers the erasure of all Native people and culture from all walks of life and brings us one step closer to genocide. It is also not a rare occurrence for people to make comments such as, "I thought all Indians had been wiped out," and so on and so forth. Here listed are a few of the student responses to a survey that I had put out following Indigenous student experiences and perspectives about Cameron University. The following quotes are from Indigenous Cameron University students about the situations they face on campus and their perspectives regarding the university. And each quote is going to be listed anonymously. So one student says that it doesn't feel safe and the conversation all feels one-sided. I feel disrespected as a minority student here and that something could happen to us and Cameron would sweep us under the rug. Women on campus don't feel safe. Many people get followed at night and get harassed by guys. Cops follow Native students on campus who are walking around during the night and day without any reason. I was the only Native student in class, and one day my professor made a statement that suggested all Natives had died. I got up and spoke out against her ignorant comments, and the professor failed me as a result. When I was in my animal husbandry class, the professor was talking about Choctaw hogs and their origins when one of my classmates turned to me and called me a slur. I reported an issue, but nothing ever happened. So several of these instances are just repeat instances. Specifically, things like reporting things to the Title IX office and nothing getting done. Usually those offenders are the athletes, and the reason that nothing gets done is because Cameron University is supported mainly by their athletic foundation, specifically basketball, softball, cross country, track, etc. That is all I have to say. The next slide is going to be for Cornell.
Yes, the history of relationships goes back, way back before even settlement. Many of the local stories of Lawton, it was a child of the prairie. And so as you begin to look at the perception is very Eurocentric, of course, but that still remains prominent within the public schools and even higher education in this area. Like because there's no people, no on the land in the perception of the settler, it's unoccupied, and so we can take it. And so the element of not only Cameron University starting out as a agricultural community college or two-year college, it's like any other land grant university in the United States, which I call a land grab university, because it sets on indigenous lands. And of course, here it's allotted land rush, and it's land theft. And also the relationship with a comprehensive regional university, which is supposed to serve, all dimensions of professions here in Southwest Oklahoma. And then the administration professed that they would like to be the university of choice of Southwest Oklahoma. And so those are the elements of how the relationship has been evolved over time. The task force was put together about 3 years ago at the request of the local Indigenous Educational Alliance. So that was 2018. It wasn't officially endorsed till 2019 by the Cameron administration. And that's our charge, our mission, and the task force, of course, was interrupted by the actions of the Halloween incident 2020, as well as COVID-19 in the spring of 2021. So we were on board with the task force that consisted of all the local tribal education directors for the Comanche, the Kiowa, the Apache, the Wichita, the Delaware, the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, as well as the local community of practice, and a few administrators at Cameron University put this task force together. And the community task force continued their advocacy in the late spring 2021 with the Cameron and with NASA and GDP. And so things came to a halt and with COVID-19. So we're still continuing our work via Zoom. Okay, for those that are in the scholarship area, these are what I call local evidence-based research. This is research that give us an opportunity to give a political landscape review of what Cameron University is all about. And so besides my dissertation on Lawton Public Schools, which says that Native students are assimilating in public schools in this area, that's nothing new, but it builds upon the foundation that the local public schools are the feeders for the Cameron University student population. So in 2020, as I came back from Oregon here, the first thing that I did is I did a study, which is the contemporary issues of Indigenous education, race, school, culture, and politics of academic success. So I presented that to all the Lawton public schools, all the public schools in Southwest Oklahoma, as well as the higher education institutions. And it's quite scathing. If anybody'd like a copy of that, I'll be happy to share it with you. And it was followed up by a mixed method study. Actually, the two coming up are mixed method that I did with Bruce Fry at the University of Kansas when I was there, about American Indian perceptions of multicultural services, racial climate, and ethnic fraud at predominantly white university, and that is Cameron University. And so to bring it more to the students of color, I did a follow-up one in it called a Survey in the Landscape, Perceptions of Multicultural Services and Race Climate at Cameron. And there's my dissertation. So that to me is a local evidence-based research that supports the work that we're doing. Next week, we meaning the community of practice, are going to be convening a community townhouse, which will consist of GDP and also NASA, as well as the education program directors in Southwest Oklahoma, to come up with our compilation of recommendations, suggestions, and also a demand list to be presented to Cameron administration. And so, but this Halloween incident all occurred within the last year, but that didn't start last year. I mean, it's been ongoing for many things, but the tipping point, the watershed issue was the Halloween incident. So I'll stop right now. I think we've tried to leave enough time that we can have conversation. For those of you that are already familiar with the conundrum of these entanglements we get into in higher education, and if you have recommendations for us, you have suggested references and articles, scholarship that we can use to integrate. We're here in the bedrock of a red state of Oklahoma. Of course, there's a lot of progressive people here. Lawton is one of the, or Comanche County is one of the states that would voted for Biden, but that's not like the rest of the state and how it reflects, because it's pretty much Republican, Trump dominated settler cultural foundation. So we get some resistance. As you can see, the stories of Shay and Heather talked about that the empire will strike back, and they're right now they're really silent. They're just waiting. So just like I said, I've already filed a civil rights complaint, and that probably be moving through there because I know as a former administrator, once you get visited by people from the Office of Civil Rights, it becomes serious. And then you begin to start to talk about what are we going to be doing about this. So I'm going to stop right now and see if anybody has any questions. And we'd love to hear your voice.
Well, this is Gleneba, and I want to thank all of you, Heather, Shay, and Professor Pee Wee Wardy. Thank you very much for that overview. And like I said earlier, you know, we've had to deal with our own Halloween racist incidents here in Albuquerque recently. And I think what I appreciate the most is the fact that you're looking at the issue that occurred with that photograph, but you're contextualizing it within the history of racism in Oklahoma. And I think it's very important to understand that. And also even the history of indigenous peoples and is there a government to government relationship in Oklahoma? I don't know. But I think that we need to talk about that notion of it recognizing self-determination and sovereignty. So we're really lucky to have two people who have deep roots in Oklahoma. We have Professor Robin Minthorn, who I've asked to make some comments and ask a couple of questions. And if Jeanette Haynes-Ryder, Jeanette, if you're not grading papers rapidly as you're listening in the conversation, I would love to hear from you. The comments could be brief because we only have not very much time here, but and then we could open up to everybody. Okay, so let's go with Robin and then we'll go to Jeanette.
Hata Robin Ziptohola Menthorn and Ka. My name is Robin Menthorn, and so good to see Heather, Shay, and Cornell, and everybody else also on the screen. I really appreciated hearing all of the level of work and the intensity that you've had to face in regards to Cameron, and knowing that that's been there, that trauma and the treatment has been there for years and years. And so Indigenous people have been facing this, and I am sure Cornell could speak even more to that than I could. And I really appreciate the intentional efforts that you are making in regards to figuring out the different ways to document, but also to be able to bring together the community. And I do think that's I'm looking forward to you all having the symposium or the gathering together where you have tribes, Indian education, as well as community to be able to be a part of that, because they should be listening. I remember a while ago, when Dolores Chu Hatchett was the director for Indian education at Comanche Tribe. I remember hearing something about how she got them to respond to serving Comanche students at Cameron University was by documenting how much scholarship dollars was going into the university, because many Comanches attend Cameron University. And so I know that that was one way for them to be responsive. And so I know that there's so many other levels, and I was just thinking about UNM and what we had to go through when I was there, going to the Board of Regents meetings, going to the ASR subcommittee meetings to be able to fill up all of the free time that they have to talk about our issues continuously, and having a presence on there. And the students are doing a lot of that labor, but also the faculty and staff are there to support them. So I would definitely say, if you can, reach out to the community, find those that are going to support you so that they can also be present there at those public forums and opportunities to continue to visibilize these issues, and so that they will listen to you. I hope for all of your work, and just want you to know my heart is with you, especially because I'm from Lawton, and I really appreciate all the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Robin. Jeanette.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jeanette Haynes-Ryder, and I'm professor of curriculum and instruction at New Mexico State University. But first and foremost, I am Cherokee Nation citizen from Claremore, Oklahoma. So I am also very familiar just in the northeastern corner with the what I used to say the redneck capital of northeastern Oklahoma, where when we talk about Native issues, everybody becomes part Indian so that they can speak on these, but there's an absence of a critical consciousness. So I am very proud of the work and the resistance the advocacy, the activism that we've heard from Dr. Piwawardi and the students as you are fighting, and we have to continue to speak up, to resist, to be insurgent in these things that continue to happen. It's not okay. And what's happening is, you know, we're not always team players, if you will. We have to stand up because it matters to those who come before us and those who come after us. As the students are practicing their voice, they're also practicing their leadership for the years to come, so that we know that we have those that are very strong coming in and trying to make change and transformations. But the institutions are places of whiteness, of mainstream status quo that continue to try to make us absent, even though we're very present in the students that we bring to campus, the faculty that are here, and the money that the tribal communities commit to these institutions to get an education, but not indoctrination. So I think our presenters today, thank you very much for your work. It is invaluable.
All right, thank you, Jeanette. God, Robin and Jeanette, man, they're so smart. They're my friends too. It's really nice to have smart friends. Okay, let's open it up for comments or questions from.
If I can, I want to be really conscious of that this is spaces for y'all, but as a member of the UNM community and as a staff at African American Student Services here, I love the opening of talking about the importance of solidarity. So for one, I just want to say profoundly grateful to be in this space. And I feel like my mind is blown. I'm from Maryland, so there is not as much conversation that I've been exposed to about Indigenous sovereignty, but y'all are, yeah. A quick question that I had was that we are looking at bringing in conversation of solidarity into more of our intentional curriculum. And so I would love to be able to know some resources or some foundational knowledge for our incoming freshmen. We have a ways of being able to have specific hands on Black students on campus. And so I know for a fact I can make resources available to so excited, certain cohorts. And I would love to be able to amplify the conversation that's happening here. If there's anything that I can do, please let me know. I'll put my information in the chat or whatever y'all need.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. Okay, Terry? And then I'm going to ask Josh Frank, one of my former, yes, Josh, you're going to say something. Okay, Terry?
So I just want, this is Terry Flowerday, and I'm originally from South Dakota and Nebraska, and was a high school teacher in Lincoln, Nebraska. Also pretty much the epicenter of redneck culture. But I was a high school teacher and a history teacher. My question is there an Indigenous history curriculum in the K-12 schools? So in other words, are there things that you can do to work with the K-12 schools so that students learn Indigenous history before they ever come to college? When I was a high school teacher, I kind of forced Lincoln Public Schools to adopt a Northern Plains, particularly Lakota history in their history classes in high school. So that's my question.
I can say for certain that most of the schools here in the Lawton Public School District do not have an Indigenous history course and do not often cover Indigenous history. What we have is history textbooks that are written to say that Native people gladly moved out of those spaces where colonizers settled. So we don't have that. However, CU NASA as well as GDP have been asked before to go ahead and participate in cultural events for said schools. And with COVID going on, it's been rough. However, we plan to start that again as soon as we can, hopefully by the fall semester. So that is what we do.
You know, if I could respond to you, the student officers have community service hours, just like Shay said, going into the communities and talking to the elementary, middle, and high schools. Shay's a graduate of one of the high schools here, Eisenhower, and you think Heather at Fletcher, right, right outside of Lawton. But they're very Eurocentric in domination of their K-12 curriculum. And even though that we present, and I told you about the study I did, gave that to the Lawton School Board and also the superintendent, it becomes very silent because it's asking for professional development, but even more so to infuse not just multicultural education knowledge bases, but how to look at indigenizing the entire curriculum. And so it got very exciting. And I don't have any response from the curriculum specialists. Their Title VI Indian education program just about collapsed because of the fallout of Indian education in our local public school system, and it was replaced by mostly non-native peoples that were just filling in those positions for the rest of the semester, and they're trying to recalibrate, but they don't reach out into our community. And so, that's another conundrum. I think their next step is probably going to the State Department of Education and just making a complaint that said, the school board locally, the superintendent does not respond to any of our inquiries, doesn't want to. And so we've got a lot of documentation that we're moving that direction to find some kind of solution. So we do have a lot of work to do. A lot of people, like the Native students, are already familiar with the work that needs to be done across not only in our city, but across the country. But that's why we're here, to give you our short story. And so, Terry, it's sad as it may be, it's true that this is settler colonial land base and in its curriculum. And I guess they don't see that. They're so colorblind, they can't even see in front of their own self that they're exploiting. And even though that they don't want to say anything of being special, they don't see how we're embedded into the United States Constitution as very unique and very sovereign. And so that's our response. So I'll stop right there.
Wanted to go ahead and say that students are pushed towards a white nationalist viewpoint, and that Black as well as Native and Hispanic students are more often than not those disenfranchised groups that are put into remedial courses or anything, or are not allowed to wear traditional garments at all in school or to public events. I know for a fact that many of our Native students have met resistance with a lot of the law enforcement that is inside our schools. Excessive violence has also been used in the past from my experiences in high school as well.
If I may add that the report that we did for the Lawton Public Schools is a survey of students and also a Native community talking about their take on Indian education. And it's out of that the new Comanche Academy Charter School was born. And because of the local charter school coming up in our community, it has been met with much resistance from the local public school superintendent, even to the point that he's suggesting to file a lawsuit against all charter schools, virtual charter schools, or any charter school here in Oklahoma, because they're a direct competition to the tax base. So there may be that kind of resistance strategy as well. That's what I'm seeing. Thank you.
Okay, Josh, would you like to give any remarks or questions?
Thank you so much, Glennie, and everybody for sharing. I had a comment and a real quick question. So the comment was, I applaud you for your work, and I've heard some of this back and forth about what is appropriate or inappropriate to do, right, in your response and how to go about it. And I encourage you to not be discouraged. I remember hearing about from one of the folks locally here who worked on discrimination in the workplace in the Bay Area, and and he was out there in a picket line, and people told him Indians don't do picket lines, And but he got out there anyways, and sure enough, tons of people came out there with him and supported him. And then he moved on to other things, moved on to this, moved on to that, and, tried every angle. So I applaud you there. And I just have the question of, have you received tribal or local pushback at all, right? People who are not for or not supportive of what you're doing, and how have you responded in turn?
I would like to respond to that. We do have support from the local tribal leaders, mostly the Comanche, the Kiowa, the Apache, and the Cheyenne Arapaho. They send representatives to much of our meetings, and next week we plan a Zoom for the community, which I invited them to be a part of, and so that's where the invitation for their suggestions and recommendations will come. We'll compile those and then echo those back over to the administration. So, that is, we're doing in a very diplomatic way. I think that when we talked to the students earlier, almost a year ago, and said, if this would have been any other ethnic group, there would have been a race riot on our campus. But the way that we see it, we'd like to do things in concert and just to help them out. But of course, they're getting a lot of resistance, even, resistance from the AAU, I think, yeah, the AAUP, even though they give us an endorsement. They passed a resolution for the in faculty senate to support the students, but they could only go so far. But I do thank you very much. Any suggestions you might have, I've just put my email address there. I'm in touch with Shay and Heather consistently. We do a lot of grassroots work here, not only just in education, but fundraising. We're both combining our Indigenous peoples events this year to consolidate efforts. So we're doing all we can with the time that we have, which is like everybody else, 24 hours a day, and we know what's important. So first things first. Thank you so much. I would like to say, if anybody would like to join us in solidarity, we have an open letter of support, and just give me your email or send it to me, and we'd be happy to add you to our list of support of solidarity and to move forward to the Cameron administration. So we're not just the only ones that are here locally trying to make things right. So if you could add your name, your role, your title to our letter of solidarity, please let me know.
Yes, and let me just go ahead and say thank you for having us as co-speakers for this event. I know that me and Heather definitely appreciate it and appreciate the chance to get the awareness of this event out there and all that we are doing to try and remedy it. But again, thank you so much for having us.
You're welcome. There's Robin suggested in the chat that maybe you could contact Red Nation here at UNM or in New Mexico. That's Nick Estes and Melanie Yazzie. That group, they may be helpful in doing some solidarity work with you across the state, from UNM to Cameron. So there's a lot of different things going on. And so hopefully this will create an awareness. It's really sad because a lot of this stuff happens. Like I said, we had our own situation here in Albuquerque, and the ACLU got involved. A lot of people got involved, and sometimes you just have to do that. It happens at many different levels that you have to bring this awareness about the Halloween, and that's one of the worst. That's like one of the bad holidays for a lot of people of color. A lot of people, women and people are objectified and sexualized and everything. It's always a bad time.
I'd like to just give a shout out to everybody for joining us today, and for the host and the beautiful idea to this creation of a research symposium institute, which is very, very needed. So, if it wasn't for this outlet, the Shay and Heather and myself would not be able to come together, because we're going to be sharing our PowerPoint to our community, as well as the opportunity to give this to a conference of this nature. So it will help affirm that the work that we're doing is still grassroots. Thank you.
Well, next year we will have this again. It'll be in person, face to face, and this will be during Nijoni days. It's usually on a Thursday. So letting you know ahead of time, start saving your money for gas or however you're going to get here. It's usually a nice event, nice homecoming for some of us. And we also have a really nice spread of food. We feed you well throughout the day. So I hope that you will continue. It'll be the 6th annual. So Heather and Shay, thank you very much for your leadership. You're learning a lot by doing this. Thank you very much for your work. And Dr. Pee Wee Wardy, it's always good to see you.